So Darwin's, from his observations, he certainly understood that more offspring are produced than can survive. Traits are different within a population, and variation can be inherited. And through that, you get change over time. So his unique contributions, and we all love this figure right here. I mean, really, Darwin is the father of cladistics. There's the first cladistic tree with, and I think, this is from his notebook B, and just iconic. This is the work that I do every day, is trying to reconstruct trees like this for fossils. But Darwin's main contributions to evolution, as we all know, are descent with modification. There's variation in a population. Modifications are passed on. Natural selection works on the things in those populations to select for different characters. Here's some moths you can barely see, which one's going to get selected here, probably that one. Which one's going to be selected here, maybe a wash. And here, it's going to be that one. The peppered moth, that's fraught with. The studies on peppered moths are fraught with problems, but certainly you can see how a predator would perceive these animals. And it's a good illustration of how natural selection can work in a population. One of Darwin's unique things, and probably the most controversial today, is recognizing the role of sexual selection in evolution. And this is the animal that brought it all out for him. What's wrong with this picture? What makes this animal fit by having those great fan and feathers on its tail? The female animal doesn't have this. This is not going to help it hide from predators. So Darwin realized there's something going on in which mate preference is taking a role in evolution. And this is something we're going to come back to with ceratopsians. So, of course, we all know the story. Wallace came up with some of the same ideas, certainly natural selection and change over time, single common ancestor. He wrote to Darwin, asked Darwin what he thought. Darwin sent the stuff to Charles Lyell, and Lyell orchestrated a reading of the two papers at the same time. So there was a joint reading of papers to the Linnean Society in London, July 1st, 1958, on the tendency of species to form varieties and the perpetuation of varieties and species by means of natural selection. So that was the real genesis of getting evolution out there to the public. Of course, it wasn't recognized at all. The president of the society said at the end of the year, nothing real earth-changing has happened this year in our society, and we'll just go on. But by the next year, 1859, Darwin finally got his tome out on the origin of species. One of the things that Darwin said in the origin of species is, he talked about the lack of transitional fossils. He said, the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory is the lack of transitional fossils. Fortunately, paleontology was about to help him out. In 1860, the first feather was found in the Solnhofen limestone of Germany. And by the next year, we had this wonderful animal, Archaeopteryx, which is a great transition between reptiles and birds. We now know, of course, that Archaeopteryx is a dinosaur, and it's a perfect transition between Maniraptor and dinosaurs, like Velociraptor and things like that, and birds. We now know that birds are dinosaurs. So, there was lots of debates about evolution, and people went back and forth. But pretty much by the 1930s and 40s, pretty much complete agreement that evolution happens, and the great modern synthesis of that time basically said that everything has a common ancestor. There's change over time, gradual change with the discovery of genetics. People understood random mutations, give it enough time, things will gradually change into other things. And so this was really dogma until two paleontologists in the 70s started to really look at the fossil record. And one of the great things about paleontology is, modern studies and genetics, they really tell us a lot about what's going on with the actual mechanisms of genetic change. But what we don't have is the crucible of time. And so paleontology actually provides us that crucible of time in which we can see how organisms have changed in the past. Well, Niles Eldredge and Stephen Jay Gould realized that the fossil record really doesn't say that. The fossil record actually records periods of stasis and then more stasis on a different axis. So really, we can think about it as punctuated change we can believe in. And this is still controversial, but the idea of phyletic gradual change over time is there's gradual change in different directions, and that ends up with multiple different species. But what we see in the fossil record is rapid change, almost instantaneously geologically. And then that change being followed by stasis, a punctuation event in which we get speciation, and then more stasis. And so these are some of the questions that we're trying to answer in looking at some of the dinosaurs, is figuring out what is the nature of the changes that these animals are undergoing. Are they gradually changing as they're diversifying, or is it more of a punctuated change than stasis? So we'll come back to that. My expertise, some of my expertise, is in the meat-eating dinosaurs, the tyrannosaurs, and the horned dinosaurs. So I want to take you through some of what we've been working on here at the University of Utah with horned dinosaurs. So when we look at the beautiful family tree of dinosaurs, there are basically two kinds of dinosaurs. There are dinosaurs with bird hips, and there are dinosaurs with lizard hips. The bird hip dinosaurs, the ornithischians, are almost exclusively herbivorous. The saurischian dinosaurs include all of the meat-eating dinosaurs, some of which later become herbivorous, and then the long-necked dinosaurs. Interestingly, the bird hip dinosaurs are not related to birds at all. But their pelvis is, roughly reminiscent of what a bird pelvis looks like. It turns out that the bird pelvis actually starts like this, and over time, the pubis rotates backwards to be right along the ischium in a bird. But we're not going to go into that today. Birds end up over here. They make it through the Great Extinction Event. Birds are still dinosaurs today. But we're going to talk about ceratopsian dinosaurs, which, if you look at all of these dinosaurs and how far they go down in time, the meat-eating dinosaurs show up late Cretaceous. Some of the plant-eating dinosaurs show up there, but ceratopsians really show up late on the scene. So basically in 2000, the state of ceratopsian knowledge was something like this. I mean, there's a great change basically in the 1980s in which we started thinking of dinosaurs as more dynamic, possibly warm-blooded animals. And this is what we really thought of them, prior to 1980. So the state of thought before 2000, there are two kinds of horned dinosaurs. There's horned dinosaurs called centrosaurs, which are relatively short-frilled, with long nose horns, short eye horns, and there's a whole variety of those. The other kind of horned dinosaur